At some point, my TBR stopped being a list of things I couldn't wait to read and became more of a quiet, in the background pile of hopeful promises to myself. So in 2026, I've decided to do something about it. Happy New Year, which is when I'm filming this. Every month this year, I plan to do a themed video where I try to read down the books in my library. Every month this year, I'm using a different theme to get to some of those books that I already own and slowly but gradually read down my library. For January, the theme is Out with the Old, In with the Read, with the intent of making room for some of those books that I have coming in the mail to me already. Which means I'm letting a wheel choose one of the oldest books from my library. The ones that have been on my list for the longest, or the ones that are publication date very old. I've put 10 of those books onto this wheel, and whatever it lands on is what I'm going to be reading and vlogging about throughout the month of January. Welcome back to Espresso Shots and Epic Plots. Grab your favorite beverage, and let's see what ancient relics from my TBR I'm finally gonna read. I have room for one more book on my January TBR. I'm starting 2026 with 158 unread books in my library. We're gonna ignore the ones that are coming in the mail. Here's my DNF rule for the project. I need to get through at least 30% of the book before I DNF. I'm not gonna do a page number. I'm gonna try to stick with a percentage. After I finish the book, or if I DNF the book, then I'm gonna decide whether I'm gonna find a home for it on my shelves or if I'm gonna get rid of it, if I'm gonna unhaul it. If I DNF it, I'm probably gonna unhaul it. This month's criteria, the 10 books were either the oldest by publication date. I have 3 that are oldest by publication date. The other 7, I really just don't know when I've got them because they've been on my physical shelves for so long that I don't even remember when I got them. So they're not necessarily old by publication date. So let's introduce the contenders. Circe by Madeline Miller, exiled to a remote island after discovering her forbidden talent for witchcraft. The scorned daughter of the sun god Helios must hone her magical powers and navigate encounters with legendary heroes and vengeful gods to forge her own destiny in a world that seeks to diminish her. I've read The Song of Achilles, and my guess is that's probably why I bought this. Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. 25 years after her testimony sent her brother to prison for the brutal massacre of their family, our main character Libby is forced to revisit that traumatic night when a group of true crime obsessives unearth secrets suggesting the truth is far more complicated than she remembers. I read Gone Girl when it came out. Shortly after it came out, I read it as like a workbook club kind of thing. And my guess is I saw this at the store or something like that, and then, had to jump on it because I had, loved Gone Girl so much. That's my guess as to when I got this one. Okay, this is a sad one that I haven't read this yet. Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. Set in 1986, 2 teenage misfits, a comic book loving boy and the new girl, form an intense and unlikely connection over shared bus rides, using music and comics to escape the pressure of high school and life. So here's why this one's sad that I haven't read this yet. I was gifted this book by a friend and always wanted to read it, but ended up reading Rainbow Rowell's Fangirl first and loved it. I cried over it. And then of course, once I read Fangirl, I'm looking over at them now, I also read all of the Simon Snow series, which is like the spin-off from Fangirl. So I have read 4 of Rainbow Rowell's other books, and this was what introduced me to her, but for some reason this is the one that I haven't read yet. Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. 10 years after her teenage daughter's mysterious disappearance, a mother begins a new relationship with a man whose young daughter bears an unsettling and impossible resemblance to her long-lost child. I think I was in a mystery thriller phase. This was gifted to me, I think along with the next one that I'm going to read about too. I hear lots of good things about Lisa Jewell's books, and I've heard that this is one of the best ones. In the Woods by Tana French. A detective must investigate a chilling murder in the same Dublin woods where he survived a traumatic, unexplained disappearance 20 years earlier. I think this is part of the series, the Dublin Murder Squad series. Don't quote me on that though. I have read Tana French's The Likeness, and I really enjoyed it. It's very dark and gritty. I don't know why I haven't gotten to this one yet. Less by Andrew Sean Greer. To avoid the awkwardness of his ex-boyfriend's wedding, a struggling aspiring novelist embarks on a whimsical, self-reflective journey around the world that forces him to confront his fears of aging and love. I could not tell you how I ended up with this book. Small Great Things by Jodi Picoult. A veteran Black labor and delivery nurse is caught in a high-stakes legal and moral battle after she is ordered not to touch the baby of a white supremacist couple. I do know where I heard about this one. So I've read some Jodi Picoult way back in the day. I've read My Sister's Keeper. I forgot the name of it. I read My Sister's Keeper. I think I read 2 others of hers. I really do enjoy the morally gray, thought-provoking way that she makes you think about things. I did want to throw My Sister's Keeper across the room, so I wouldn't necessarily, but I mean, they're all morally gray issues, so they're supposed to make you infuriated, I'm sure. This one, I had a friend that read it and loved it and talked about it, and so the next time I saw it in the store, probably Half Price Books, is when I picked it up, but haven't read it yet. Geek Love by Katherine Dunn. To save their struggling carnival, a circus family deliberately breeds their own human oddities, triggering a dark and disturbing saga of sibling rivalry and obsession. I feel like this was my mom's book, and I accumulated it when we moved and went in separate directions. This is a perfect transition into one of the oldest books. I couldn't believe when I was putting this book into my digital library. This was published in 1989, I believe it was. Yeah, I think this one's 1989. I did a double take. I thought that was wrong. In my head, we did not have this on our shelves for that long, but now that I'm looking at it, it is very yellowed. Even though I've done numerous book unhaulings, this one I just keep being pulled to keep, and so I should probably read it soon. Okay, the last 2 books here, I do know when I purchased, or when I received, I shouldn't say because I didn't buy one of them. So they haven't been on my shelves for very long, but they are old by publication standards, similar to Geek Love. Equal Rights by Terry Pratchett. This is part of the Discworld series. This is the first of the Witches off-branch of the Discworld series. In this satirical Discworld entry, a young girl named Esk challenges the magical establishment when she accidentally becomes the first female to inherit the staff and powers of a wizard. I read Mort earlier this year, and it was okay. It was not, I know everybody loves the Discworld books, and so that was the first one I tried. I haven't totally given up on the series yet, so I think I bought this when I bought Mort. There's various entry points into Discworld. The Witches was another series that I was interested in, so I kept this and I do want to try it, even though I know when I bought it, it's on here because the Discworld series was published in the 80s and 90s by Terry Pratchett, so this particular one was published in 1987. So it is one of the oldest by publication date. And last but not least, this book I accumulated through a library unhaul through my school, and one of my teacher friends recommended that I snag it, and he had read it and enjoyed it, and so I decided, hey, what the heck, it's free, why not add it to my shelves. A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. This satirical masterpiece follows the eccentric and arrogant Ignatius J. Riley as he bumbles through a series of disastrous jobs and social encounters in New Orleans. So this is, well, it's actually technically not the oldest thing that I own by publication date. This was also published, I think it was 1980. I actually thought it was older than that. This is considered a classic though. So this is on this list because it's one of the oldest by publication date. Technically, the oldest book that I own by publication date is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, but that is already on my TBR because of the winter TBR women reading books by women game that my mom and I did. I have put those 10 books on this spinner wheel. I'll do a screen capture, so here, I'll scooch over a little bit so I'll put the wheel up here. There's definitely some of these that I would rather get more than others, and I only have so much time in my month to read books. Okay, so we're going to add Less by Andrew Sean Greer to my list. I think this is going to be a light, fun, what's the word I'm looking for, find yourself kind of book and I know there's actually a sequel to this, so maybe it will, well, I should probably not be buying more books because I read this, but I guess we'll see. Okay, so for now, we're going to add Less to my monthly TBR. By the time you guys see this whole vlogging series, I will have read a couple of these. But my January TBR set, I'll be sure to bring you guys along. We're gonna do some fun stuff. I'll just show you some clips of the kind of things that my family and I do.
While we may come from different places and speak in different tongues, our hearts beat as one. In light of recent events, the bonds of friendship we made this year will be more important than ever. Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light.
a holiday weekend. It's about halfway through January. It's Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, and I thought it would be a good time to start working on my Out with the Old, In with the Read book. So on my spinner wheel, I got Less by Andrew Sean Greer. It's a holiday. I don't have work on Monday, so I've got 3 days. I could probably knock this out. And it's finally a weekend where we don't have anything going on. But before I get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the incoming and outgoing books. I got a pile of books over here that I hauled recently, but before I talk about those, I want to share some of the books that I unhauled. I wasn't a very good vlogger. I didn't get some video of it, but I took a photo, mostly because I wanted to make sure I updated my digital tracker. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I unhauled 10 books. I unhauled The Wedding People, which I read, and I went back and forth about my feelings on it. It had some poignant lines, but in general, it was not what I was expecting, and I can't really see myself reading it again. And I know that it's a popular book, so I unhauled that one. I unhauled Shield of Sparrows. I had a really pretty special edition of Shield of Sparrows, but it's just not doing it for me. I unhauled Ready Player One. I had it in another room. I really liked Ready Player One. I really enjoyed it when I read it, and then I read the second one, and I reread the first one before the second one came out. I just can't see myself reading it again. I don't even have the second one anymore because I didn't like it enough. Are you coming up or what? Thank you. You have to settle though. Where are you going? You can lay down there. Okay. I also unhauled a V.E. Schwab, which I own a lot of V.E. Schwab. I unhauled Gallant, which I had purchased and read and was very meh about. I read Little Fires Everywhere and actually enjoyed it, probably more than I thought I was going to. I think I'm going to watch the TV series, but I did unhaul it because I can't really see reading it again. And then I had the 5 current Sarah J. Maas ACOTAR books. I've read them all. There was a time in my life where I could have seen reading them again, but I don't think that is happening anymore. And so I decided to unhaul all of them. They were in pretty good condition. I go to Half Price Books, basically. This was the first time that I went to Half Price Books and actually left with money, not spending. I mean, I did spend a little bit, but they offered me enough and then I couldn't spend as much. I thought for sure that in January, after the holidays, after people ow, I'm gonna kick you off if you just claw me. I thought for sure that in January, people would get rid of books that they didn't want anymore to make room for new books, or they would get rid of books that they had gotten as gifts and didn't want. So I thought I was gonna have like a nice selection, and I did not. I found 2 things. I got this edition of Jane Eyre, which I'm not super excited by. It's not very pretty. It was literally the only edition that they had. I couldn't believe it. It's a classic. I thought for sure I could get a cooler edition than this, and I went back and forth between buying it, but it's one of the ones that I picked from the game that my mom and I did, and I need to read it, and I think it was like $8 or something like that. It might have even been less, and it looks brand new. And so even though it's not very pretty, I got it. And then I got If We Were Villains by ML Rio. I keep reading, if you liked Babel, then try ... and this usually comes up as one to read if you liked Babel, and I didn't really feel like I was paying for it because I was using a credit from some previous books. I'm not going to talk a lot about Jane Eyre because it's a classic. I don't know a whole lot about it. I think I read the plot and still don't know a whole lot about it, and so we'll wait until I read it to find out more about it, and then I'll tell you all about it when I do my wrap up. If We Were Villains, like I said, it's a dark academia. I'm just going to read the back. I think that's the easiest way. I won't read all of it though, because I think the less you know, the better. Enter the players. There were 7 of us then. 7 bright young things with wide, precious futures ahead of us. Until that year, we saw no farther than the books in front of our faces. So I know there's a play, there's a murder, there's somebody getting out of jail for supposedly committing that murder, and then you kind of go back and forth in time to figure out what's going on. And it's dark academia, so it's taking place in a school. That's what I know about this one. Some books that I had purchased that I definitely knew were coming. This I'm mildly annoyed by, but whatever, I'll live. So I just finished Jade City by Fonda Lee, and so I had to buy the next 2. And I went on Blackwell's website. I've never bought anything from Blackwell before, but I knew they existed. And I was looking for covers that matched the cover that I currently have. I think they have since redone the covers. You know, I checked Amazon, I checked Half Price Books, I checked a couple other book outlet, like I checked some of those, and I couldn't find the covers that I wanted. So I went to Blackwell, found the covers that I wanted. However, the ones that showed up are not the covers that I wanted. These do not match my current cover, but that's okay. I'm fine. At least I didn't give money to Amazon. I won't talk a lot about these two specifically. Jade City is a mafia-themed, crime-based, warring families in a world where Jade gives certain people magic. It's following a family, one particular family, at least the first book, followed one particular family in kind of this warring faction. You had multi-POV. It really was it was a very character-driven story. There was a plot, but the plot is one of those warring factions in like a mafia Godfather driven kind of like thing. So it's very long and drawn out and doesn't seem like it has an ending, because that's how all of that stuff seems.
That's when I thought I was out. They pulled me back in.
And so I really do think of these as like character-driven novels, which I enjoyed. These are just a continuation of that. And from what I've heard, you don't get attached to any character because you never know what's going to happen. So I'm an Aardvark subscriber. I don't get something every month, but I did this month because I figured why not? I actually got 2 books this month. I've already opened these. These are not unboxings. I've seen them. I didn't get any last month in December. I kept going back and forth between some, but I didn't know enough about them, and I was just kind of hemming and hawing, and I made it all the way until almost halfway through the month, and I figured if I hadn't picked anything out yet, then I might as well skip it. I kept thinking about one of the books, and it was still available for this month, so I did purchase the Once and Future Queen. And then one of their January books that I did want was an Arcane Inheritance. This has been getting mixed reviews. I'm trying this year to read books that sound interesting to me regardless of reviews. I see the reviews when I'm like tracking things, like I see the number when I'm tracking things, but I'm not going in and actually reading the reviews ahead of time. And it sounded interesting to me anyway. The Once and Future Queen is kind of a portal story, if you want to call it that. So it's about a girl who lives in the current modern day world, and she's told that she does not belong in this time period. She does not belong in this world. And so she goes through a portal to end up back in Camelot era. Her name is Vera. It's a play on Guinevere, which I get called often, ironically. When Vera learns that she is meant for another time, she leaps at the chance to embrace a new life of valor, intrigue, and unexpected magic in this bold and romantic retelling of Arthurian legend. An Arcane Inheritance just sounded like another dark academia novel. It's written by a BIPOC author, so I wanted to make sure I'm reading diversely. Legends say Warren University was built on the bones and forbidden magic of its most prized BIPOC students, hiding a secret society that will do anything to keep their own powers burning bright. I don't know a whole lot, but it was dark academia. It sounded interesting. It's about a girl who's trying to prove that she belongs at this Ivy League school and uncovers a lot of secrets while she's there. I've read, is it Ace of Spades or Ace of Spades was another one. I'll put a picture of that one up. This seems very like dark fantasy magic. Ace of Spades has a very like Jordan Peele Get Out kind of vibe. I wouldn't call it dark academia, but I did see some parallels kind of in the idea of those. So this sounded interesting to me, and so I figured, why not? And then last but not least, I am not subscribed to Fairy Loot. I got this on Pango, but the person shipped it in the Fairy Loot box. I paid a little extra. So again, I told you I'm a V.E. Schwab fan, and I have not purchased Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil yet because I absolutely despise the original cover, and I really liked the Fairy Loot cover. I didn't want to pay over $100 for it because although I like it, I do have my limits. I found this on Pango, and it's been out for a while, and so I found it. It was about, I think it was $45. It was under $50, and then it might have been $50, and then the person gave me like a $5 credit, and it was free shipping and all this stuff, and so I was able to get this for $45, which I know is a lot for a book, more than, I could have paid less for it, but I like this edition a lot better. So, and it came with the card and the box and everything. So it's like I've actually gotten quite a few Fairy Loot books on Pango. I just try not to spend like $100. My husband doesn't care when I buy books. I think he would care if I spent $100 on one book. I think I would care if I spent $100 on one book. Anyway, so to the reason we're really here. Les, I think I've already told you a little bit about this book. I listened to about 30 minutes of it. I was kind of annoyed because the audio seems to be not based on chapters. Each audio track, it just has 8 audio tracks and they're like an hour long. And I was like, oh my gosh, is that the way the book's set up? Like, are they just really long chapters? And based on my initial scanning, I don't think they are, but I can't tell for sure. Maybe they are. I don't like when they do that. I listened to another audiobook that was like that, where the tracks for the audiobook did not match up with the chapters, but it makes it really hard to go back and forth between audio and physical book. Hopefully this isn't like that. I've read about 15 pages. Just as a reminder, it's about Arthur Less, who I have found out he's actually an author. This person that he was seeing for like a decade is getting married and invited him to his wedding. To have an excuse to not go to the wedding, Arthur is going to start traveling. And that's essentially all that we have learned right now. We learned a little bit about him and his ex, and we know a little bit about him as a person, but I'm actually just now getting into, he got the invite. We're figuring out what his excuse is going to be. So I'm going to read a little bit and then I'll be sure to give you guys an update when I'm maybe a third of the way through. So I thought I would do a check-in with you on Less. Looking to see how far I am. So I'm about 30% of the way through Less. I have to run some errands today and actually leave the house. So I thought I would do it early in the morning because I'll probably listen to more of it in the car while I'm driving around. Early on in the book, Less gets the wedding invitation. Arthur Less is his name. He just goes by Less throughout most of the book. Less gets the wedding invitation, and you quickly find out he's had all of these invitations for author events all over the globe. And so he decides, and he really hasn't responded to any of them. And so he decides to basically accept all of them and make this world travel trip over the time that the wedding is happening. So he has an excuse to not come to the wedding without looking like he's avoiding it for, whatever reason, because it's his ex and everybody knows. It's a pretty straightforward book. I started listening to the audio and I was getting a little confused on all the people. In my journal, I went back and wrote down some of the names. I got confused because he was in a almost 9-year relationship with the man that's getting married, but then he was also in a almost decade-long relationship with another man earlier, and so I was getting kind of confused. I think I missed that at some point, so I did have to sit and write down, I wrote down the people, the main people that I think are involved, and then the places that he's going. Robert is a poet that Les dated when Les was younger and Robert was an older man. And then Freddie, or Federico, is a younger man that was dating Les. I'm using the term dating loosely. They were in a long-term tristy type of relationship, and in this case, Freddie was the younger man, but they were never really serious or monogamous. There's not a lot of monogamy in the book, period. That's mentioned a lot. Les he's about to turn 50 while he's on this trip. He is a gay man from the late 80s generation. I'm not annotating per se the way that I would normally annotate like a mystery or a fantasy book, but there have been a few lines that I've highlighted because I think that they're interesting. The whole book is essentially about Les getting older and figuring out what he's done with his life and what he's accomplished, like many people do when they get older. The book is also not told, there's a lot of jumping back and forth in time, so it's hard to remember where certain quotes are because they're not happening chronologically, which is totally fine. I think that keeps a contemporary fiction book interesting when it jumps back and forth in time because it, mixes up, what's happening in the everyday mundane life. There's a scene where Les is talking about no other gay man has ever gotten old, and obviously he's saying it in jest. He does mention the fact that when he was growing up, he didn't meet a lot of gay men over the age of 40. They didn't live that long because of the AIDS epidemic. Obviously, that is hyperbole and an exaggeration, but he didn't have a lot of older gay male role models. And so that's one of the reasons he's having a hard time coming to terms with aging. He's starting his journey in New York, and then he's going to Mexico City, Turin, Italy, Berlin, Germany, all over Morocco, and then ending in Japan. And he's doing various writing and author events in these cities. So a lot of it is being paid for. There is part of this is he's meeting up with some friends, so he does have to pay for that portion of it. And he's by no means a wealthy, well-known author. And so he talks a lot about how he has to scrimp and save and be frugal with his money throughout this journey. Basically, each section of the book is a different one of these locations. And so he started in New York, and then last night I finished the part where he was through Mexico City. But first, when I was listening to the audio, it was a little jarring because we were in New York, he was getting ready, he was in a hotel waiting to be picked up by a publicist who was going to take him to an author event. And then all of a sudden, we were in the past meeting someone, which I picked up on easily, but we were talking about a different person. And we were talking about a different person as if they were the main character. And so that kind of threw me for a minute. I'm used to it now. But from an audio standpoint, it was a little jarring. I think if I had been looking at the book at the time, I would have seen like a space or a decorative line break or something like that would have let me know that there was a time jump. Another unique thing about this book is our narrator is a character that is telling the story about Les. And towards the end of the first section, you do meet this narrator. The narrator says, I met Les when I was 12 at an adult party, and then the narrator talks about their interaction with him. But you don't know who the narrator is. The narrator doesn't give you their name. You know that there is an age difference. I'm curious to see if throughout this book we're going to find out who the narrator is, find out if the narrator is an important person in the story. But I do think that's unique. I haven't read a lot of books that have that kind of twist. I mentioned mentioned earlier that the audio was broken up into 8 chunks. That is in fact how the book is. Each chunk of the book is about an hour, and each chunk is a location that he's going to. If you like short, quick chapters, this is not the book for you. It is making a little bit harder to pick it up and put it down, going between audio and visually looking at it. On the flip side of that, it does kind of motivate me to get to the next break before I put it down. Last night we watched, the book I finished before this was Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton, and I had been wanting to read that because my husband had been wanting to see the movie. So last night we watched the movie and we finished the movie and it was late, but I was like, well, I'm gonna read one more chapter, and that chapter happened to be about an hour long. I was able to get through the next stop on his trip. In that respect, it's like motivating me to keep reading more. The book is good. It doesn't feel slow. Like I said, we're jumping through time a lot. We're learning a little bit more about him. I suspect he is being presented as this wallflower. He, always wears the same suits. One of the other characters, his rival, tells him, you need an edge, and he doesn't really have an edge, but he talks about going to author events and people don't show up. When he goes to his New York event where he's introducing this big famous sci-fi author, and the publicist lady is like, Arthur Less, who the hell is that? And he basically says, my entire life nobody has known who I am, which isn't entirely true, but he is definitely an introverted homebody. I did think it was interesting. Let's see if I can find this quote. This one I know I highlighted. In one of his interactions with Freddie, they were at a bar and it was something where it was like, come up with one sentence to describe somebody. And Freddie said that Arthur Less was the bravest person he knows, which Arthur doesn't understand, doesn't agree with. He doesn't think he's brave at all. He actually thinks he's a coward. And he says, strange though, because he is afraid of everything, nothing is harder than anything else. So he's just as afraid of going on this trip as he is of ordering food at a new restaurant. And I thought that was an interesting statement, because I do kind of agree with that. When you are equally afraid, I'm going to use the term afraid loosely, but when everything is a new experience, you treat them all the same, or none of them are more afraid, fearful than the other. But I don't know that I necessarily can relate to that or anything, but I did think that was an interesting quote that stood out to me. I am actually enjoying it. I can't say right now whether it's one that I will keep or not. It is interesting. I can visualize it. I can see, it reminds me very much of the book Guncle. It has a similar vibe to it. I will say Arthur Less is not like the main character in Guncle, but it's that type of writing. We're going back and forth in time. It's like a figuring out who you are kind of book, figuring out in your older years, which, while I am not quite as old as Arthur Less, I think all of us kind of went through our quarter life, midlife crises in our lives, and we're trying to figure it out. My goal is to try to get through another, 2 or 3 stops. I would love to, I have 3 days off, so I would love to finish this book up or get pretty close to finishing it over the long weekend, so I can make sure that I keep checking in. I'll try to keep it spoiler free as we go on, and I'll check in either later today or tomorrow after I've gotten through more of the book. About 66%, 2/3 of the way into Less, and it's time for another check-in. I'm gonna tell you things that are happening in the book. I don't really consider them spoilers because the book isn't really, it's contemporary fiction. It is about a man finding himself while he's on these travels, and I feel like that's pretty apparent in the synopsis of the book. So I don't really feel like any of these are spoilers. The last time I checked in, he had gone through Mexico City, and in comparison, I would say that his journey in Mexico City was boring compared to some of the other places he's been to. So not a whole lot happened. There were some funny interactions. He thought he was gonna have an awkward interaction with somebody from his past. Then he journeyed on to Italy, and Italy was a very short trip. He has a lot of reflections and thinking about his career as an author and whether he is successful as an author. There was a funny interaction at the beginning where he feels like he's getting this traveling thing down and then he thinks he completely botched something. So that was kind of a funny, like almost like time change. Do I have everything? Am I going in the right place? Being jet lagged and not knowing what's going on. That was kind of an interesting interaction that happened. Then we get to Germany, and Germany was really funny because he's in Germany for a long period of time. He's teaching a 5-week course, and early on in the book they talk about his invitation to Berlin, where they think that he speaks fluent German and his agent thinks he speaks fluent German, and Les also thinks he speaks fluent German, but he doesn't speak fluent German. He took German growing up since he was little, so he speaks German the way that, like, if a child said they took German all throughout their school age years but never was immersed in the language and the culture would say they spoke fluent German, and that's about where he's at. And so a lot of his interactions are very entertaining because there is some dialogue issues. The people understand what he's trying to say, but it was very entertaining to read all of his interactions because he refuses to speak English. He just speaks German the whole time. So he's in Germany for a long time, and so you get to see a longer period of time, I should say. So you get to see a lot of those interactions. His class actually sounded really fun. I would have taken, if I had been an English major or something, it would have been a class that I would have taken, which I wasn't expecting. He seems like such like a button-up wallflower kind of guy that I wasn't expecting his class to be the way that it was. After Germany, he is supposed to go to Morocco, but he has an extended layover in France. So it's short. There's a lot of flashbacks to other times he's been in France. He's been there with both of his previous long-term exes, so he is comparing those interactions. You hear a little bit more about those relationships, and then he moves on to Morocco, and Morocco is the first part of his trip. It's for fun, maybe. So he's meeting friends, it's somebody's birthday, and that person is also turning 50. Les is going to turn 50 on this trip as well, this portion of the trip. They're doing a fun adventure. They're on camels. They're in the desert. There's a really interesting interaction I want to share. So he has a friend there that he has met up with. That's not the person whose birthday it is, but his friend is another gay man, and he sees him and his partner as a success story. Yes, you can be an old gay married couple and be happy, because that's not been his experience or his thought. The man that he's with there, it's Lewis is his name, and Lewis says, hey, we're getting divorced, but he frames it as a success story, like they were married for 20 years and it was a success. Les is like, what are you talking about? Something had to have gone wrong. Why would you be doing this? And Lewis is like, no, when this trip is over, does that mean that the trip wasn't a success because it was over? When the sun goes down, does that mean that the sun was not a success for the day just because it ended? And I thought that was really, I don't know that I necessarily agree with it or would want to do that, but it was an interesting way to view a relationship. And then his friend Lewis is like, I think I'm going to be alone for a while now. He's thinking about the idea of being alone, and he realizes that even after Robert, his first lover, he never truly let himself be alone. Why this endless need for a man as a mirror, to see the Arthur Les reflected there? Why not cover the mirrors, rend the fabric over his heart, and just let himself mourn? Perhaps he should try alone. And I just think that's really interesting. I think a lot of people think about how they need somebody else to be there in a relationship status to see a reflection of who they are. But really, you need to know who you are to be in a good, healthy relationship. And you need to know enough about yourself to not lose yourself in the other person and not try to make yourself something else around this other person. I do also understand this idea. There are people that cannot be alone and do not want to be alone. So that's where he is in his trip. I'm still in the middle of the Morocco chapter, but it's Monday. We have Monday off. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Having a Monday off is like the best thing ever because we did our weekend. I had to do all the chores. I had to do the grocery shopping. I did a lot of running around yesterday, and to do that and then go to work the next day, you feel like you really only have one weekend day. So having a Monday off is always the best because it's bonus day. But we do need to run a couple errands, and we're gonna go pick up some lunch. She has a project that she has to finish. So I just wanted to make sure I checked in really quick before we went out and ran some errands. I think I might actually finish this today. If I don't finish it today, I'll definitely finish it tomorrow, and then I'll make sure to check in with you again to see if I'm gonna keep it or what my final thoughts are. All right, so that's all for now. I'll see you in a little bit. I finished Les by Sean Andrew Greer, and let's start with the positives. It did have a little bit of a twist, We did find out who the narrator was. I will say that is the twist. I think the last time I checked in with you, he had been to Germany and Morocco. His last stop was Japan and then home. That's kind of how the book ended. And I was a little worried that we were going to be left with a lot of questions. I know there is a sequel to this book, so I wasn't sure. I couldn't imagine how it would be a cliffhanger, but I wasn't sure how a sequel really fit in. There is a conclusion. There is, like, I would say there's a satisfactory conclusion. I ended up rating it like 3.5, 3.75, which isn't terrible. I don't regret reading it. It didn't feel like a waste of time. I don't like wish that I had DNF'd it. I might even pass it on to my mom because it did remind me so much of Gunkel. I enjoyed Gunkel more for sure. He went to a lot of different locations in this book, and I am somebody that has traveled, and I haven't been to all of these places, but I've been to places similar to this, so I could picture and imagine, you know, the people and the culture and the places. I do feel like the descriptors or the amount of time spent in the locations was a bit lacking, and I wonder if somebody who wasn't as well traveled, how they would envision everything or how they would picture everything, because there was very, like, it felt like, I don't know how else to describe it. It felt like falling asleep and waking up at various points of a trip. And while I understand you don't need like every single waking moment of an experience, in Gunkel, this was happening in the same location. It was their day-to-day life. Here, he's traveling around the world. And so I did feel like we needed, and it is a whirlwind trip, like he's not spending a lot of time in some of these places, but I felt like we needed just a bit more in some of the locations. The ending came very quickly. Like, I even went back and reread some of it to make sure that I didn't miss anything, because he was in one country and then all of a sudden he was home, and he was in a country in a precarious isn't the right word. He was in a situation in this country, and then the next thing I knew he was home, and I was very like, I had to go back and like, did I miss something? The time jumps, and it's not narrator jumps. It's not like you're jumping narrators. Les is not always the person that you're learning about their history and their past. There's other people in the story that are adjacent to him. You would jump to those people, then you would jump in time. And if I wasn't physically reading the book, like, you know, there were times I just had the audio, it was very jarring and confusing. At least in the physical book, there would be a space, like an extra space, or there would be one of those like decorative line breakers. I'm sure those have a name. If anybody knows the name of those, leave it in the comments. There would be a space that would let me know that there was a jump of time, but without that, it was very jarring, all of the jumping around. There were quite a few, you know, interesting conversations about, you know, relationships and how other people see Les. You know, as I said, you're hearing how the narrator sees Les, not so much how he sees himself. I was writing in my new journal that I've been working on this year, and one of the questions it asks is, what was the aim of the book and did the author fulfill it? I don't know that I could answer that for this book. I don't think it's semi-autobiographical. The gentleman on the back does not look like he is going to be 50, but who knows, maybe he is. I thought some of it was to reflect on aging and to reflect on relationships, and then to put a character in awkward situations for humor and growth purposes. I don't know that I could say that Les grew as a person or learned something about himself by the end of it. And if you read the plot of the second book, it almost like confirms this idea that he didn't really learn or grow. I don't know. I didn't really get a lot of like self-discovery and identity. Like I said, I chuckled at a few things. There were a few conversations he had with people that made me go and talk to some other people about it. So in that regard, it was, you know, a worthwhile reading experience. Yeah, I just felt like for a book where he was going to 7 different locations and it was only 200 some odd pages. It's 260 pages is what it is. To me, if you're going to that many places and you're trying to experience growth and development as a human being, felt like I needed maybe another 50 to 100 pages. But even then, I still don't know that Les would have figured anything else out in those 50 to 100 pages for whatever that's worth. I would say it was like meh to meh plus 3.5, 3.75. I like where I'm landing with that. In terms of the theme, I mean, this definitely worked. I could not tell you where I got this book. It has been on my shelves for quite some time. This has been on my, what I call like my active shelves in my library space, if you will. So it's been one that I've been wanting to read. It definitely meets the criteria of being something that I've had around for a while that I needed to get to, which was the purpose of this month's challenge. I enjoyed it overall. I think it was about what I expected. I had looked at reviews and saw, I think that it has an average of like 3.6. My review was very similar. That's one of my goals this year, is to not look too deeply into reviews. I think that number is always kind of there, so that number kind of hits you in the face when you're like doing any sort of book tracking of any kind, unless you're just doing it on paper. And so you always kind of have that number in the back of your head, but I'm actively trying not to go in and read other people's reviews before I read a book. I think that's one of the reasons I put it off. I was expecting it to be one thing, and then I knew it wasn't going to quite live up to those expectations, but I couldn't get rid of it. It was easy, it was tempting, it was there, I already owned it. I like the colors on the cover. I do not like the cover of the second book. I will not be reading the second book. If you read the plot of the second book, I think if this is supposed to be about discovery and figuring out who you are, then the second book just seems like a repeat of it, purely based on the plot. I haven't read the second book, nor do I plan to. Am I going to keep it? I'm going to see if my mom wants it, and if she doesn't have any interest in it, then I will probably unhaul it, because I can't see myself reading it again. It's weird that I'm going to recommend it to my mom, but I know she'll at least like make some correlations between it and Guncle. But if she doesn't want it, then I'll probably unhaul it. I do think it's important to go through and look at the books that I've had on my shelves for a long time. I only had about 10 that really met the criteria, but I do think it's important to go through and either clean those out or make yourself read those. Before I send you guys off, in my last check-in, I had received some books that I ordered from Blackwell's, and this one hadn't shown up. I did order a copy of The Goblin Emperor, and specifically I wanted this Blackwell edition of The Goblin Emperor. I've heard a lot of things about this, just about how cute and charming it is, and everybody that reads it loves being in the world. This particular edition, I loved the gold foiling and the way that it looked. This is another acquisition to my library that I wanted to show off. That's it for this month's Read Down My TBR. If you have any thoughts about this book, or if you have any thoughts about any of the books that I purchased or books that I unhauled this month, or if you have any books that are the oldest on your shelves that you have been inspired to read, then share them in the comments. If you're enjoying this video series, make sure you give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one in the series. Episode 2, which is going to be in February, is going to be adorable. I'm very excited about it. I'm going to go on a blind date with a book. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure you like and subscribe. And until then, happy reading. I've put 10 of those books that I own into a... Oh, need my phone. Okay. Read it or eat it. My read down... Oh, I guess it goes like this. No. I thought it would be a good time. Gosh, I feel like I even bought this book twice on accident, but I only have one now. I'll make sure to put some of that footage in here if I haven't already. Hey, it's a spinny chair. You know that if you liked Babel, hey, I'm up here. Thanks, okay. Eccentric and arrogant Ignatius J. Riley. Ooh, that's hard to say. Hey. Sorry, my cat ran into it. Stop. Hey, Cheddar, you can't keep moving the camera. I almost never say that about books. I felt like I needed, unless it's a novella, I say that about novellas. She goes by Vera. Hey, no. You're out.